So it's my pleasure to invite 4 speakers today. I don't know which 4 speakers we're getting, and we're going to hear about 4 different projects. And I do know that these do show family history in its finest. So thank you.
All right, thanks, Stephen. Hello, hi. So I'm Martin McDowell. I'm the Education Officer of the Society, and I'm going to be talking to you today about our Ballycarry and Island McGee projects. After myself, it's going to be Sandra Artis, who's going to be talking about our transcriptions. Then Vincent's going to tell us about what we're doing in Ballyeaston, and Linda's going to be talking about our City Cemetery DNA project. So that's the 4 speakers you're going to be hearing today. So we'll try and keep it as short as we can, so as it keeps going at pace for you. So I'm just going to really explain to you about our Society DNA projects. And what we did a few years ago was we decided that we wanted to do something to test the boundaries of DNA, to show that DNA could be used in a way that people weren't generally using it. Because most people, if you've done a DNA test, you know that it's just a matter of doing your own test and then working with your own matches. And we wanted to do it on a slightly bigger basis and actually look at a region and try to maybe start to build family trees back beyond paper records. So we hit on the idea of doing it in the area of Ballycarry. The reason we picked Ballycarry was because people had lived in that area for many generations. A lot of the original families were still there, so we could find people who could potentially test for us. There was also the fact that they had a good set of headstones, good set of wills, so we knew there was information that we could harness in order to try to build up the family trees that were going to be important to us. So we chose Ballycarry. Then we found out that a lot of our Ballycarry testers also had an ancestor from Island McGee. And we decided then we could actually maybe do a geographical project somewhere else, but we actually thought if we did Island McGee, then that would run into what we were already doing because it was the neighbouring townlands. So we expanded it into the region of Island McGee, and I think if anything, our Island McGee project has become even more successful than what we've achieved in Ballycarry. But I'm just going to talk you through it now in slightly more detail. So as I said, this is quite an innovative project. It's the first time that anything's been done in the British Isles on this scale. And that's because we have been going out and sourcing people to test for us. Now what we wanted to do was we wanted to find people who were descendants of these original families. So therefore we had to be quite choosy in who we tested. And we realised that what we were going to try and do was inspire people to test, but obviously not everyone was invested in the objectives of our project as we were. So we quickly realised that we were going to have to fund this. And we have then been able to achieve the fact that we were able to go up to people who maybe had no interest in family history or weren't ever going to go down the whole route of DNA. We've actually tested quite a lot of people that don't even have computers, they've never used email. And for that reason, we were then managing to get DNA from people who were never going to test, and we were never going to get them into the database. And therefore, we manage their test results on their behalf. They can access them at any time. And it means that we have the best of both worlds, is that we can guarantee those testers get in there, and then we can use the results to get further with the objectives of our project. So what we find is that we are linking people who are already tested around the world, and we're able to link them in to find matches with people that we have tested through our project. And that's been something we've been very successful in. And how that can be very helpful is that maybe when someone immigrated to America in the 1860s or 1870s, well then they started to complete the census forms every 10 years and they put down their birthplace as Ireland. But over the generations, everyone's really forgotten where in Ireland they came from. They know they've got the Irish ancestors, they just don't know where from. And what happens then is when we do a geographical project, we're building up the DNA testers in that area, and then people will get a number of matches to people who live in that area. And that is very helpful, and that is helping people all around the world discover that they have ancestors from specific places. So that can be another benefit for us. So with a DNA match, we find that everybody is going to have their own individual match list, and then you're going to have a common ancestor with all of those people. So that enables us to find people who are matching all of our individual kits. We're growing the family trees, so even before we started testing people, we've started to build up family trees of these families, as soon as we knew who to test, and we were able then to start to connect branches of this tree together. So we've maybe been able to get a branch of a tree back to about 1800, and we've got another branch of a tree back to 1800, but it's the same surname. We didn't have enough information in the paper records to link these two trees together, but through DNA, that's what we're achieving. And we can see how these families are connected back beyond those paper records. So how does it all work? Well, for those of you who don't know, DNA is passed on to you by your parents. You get half from your mother and half from your father. So the only way that you can share DNA with someone alive today is if you both have this concept of a common ancestor. So you both are descended from the same ancestral couple somewhere further back in time. Now many times that's going to be back beyond paper records where maybe you're not going to be able to actually confirm it. But in many cases, particularly when we're doing a geographical project, we can find the common ancestor, and that's what we're seeking to do when we find these connections. So you're going to get DNA from your parents, you've got little bits from your grandparents, your great-grandparents, and the autosomal DNA test will take you back to about your 5 times great-grandparents. So that's taking you back into the mid to early 1700s. But then there's other types of DNA tests as well. There's Y-DNA tests, there's mitochondrial DNA tests, and we have harnessed the power of all of these tests in our geographical projects. So anyone who shares a segment of DNA with someone else has to have a common ancestral couple in common. So when we were building the trees for these families, we have been able to put all of the different sources together. So we're looking at birth, marriage and death certificates, we're looking at census records, land records, we're looking at church records, at baptisms and burials, we're looking at gravestone inscriptions, wills and other sources as well. So that's just some of the things that we can connect through the DNA when we're building the family. Well, what's the whole point of doing this? That's maybe something that you're wondering about. Well, it's getting more people into the database. It's building up that community level of DNA, and we can start to then work out where people came from and the connections with other communities around the world. We are recreating genealogical information which currently doesn't exist. There is no archive that has information that says that these people are related in this particular way. And what we're basically doing is uncovering history. We're recreating it, and we're recreating family trees that maybe haven't existed for 100 or more years. I think it's a very important thing to do, and it's a legacy to people in the future that we can recreate that information now and have it available for generations to come. We're also then recording this information on WikiTree. I'm just going to speak about that in a little second, but as well as that, it's giving more benefits. It's inspiring people, it's showing them what can be achieved through DNA testing, and through that we're hoping that other people are going to test as well, and that has been our experience. We're finding that when people see what we're achieving, it's also encouraging them to do other projects and to expand things. And although we're doing 2 society DNA projects, they're on a wide scale. This is the Ballycarry and Isle McGee. We've then expanded that into smaller projects which are done in our individual branches, and you're going to hear about 2 of them later in today's presentation. But we also find there's other benefits outside that of genealogy. This is helping people to find links within a community. It's helping people around the world to find links to an individual place, but also in a community. I think it's important today, in today's type of society and the way we all live, that we all realise that we've got connections to those around us. And people who are maybe living in villages and townlands are now finding that they have unknown connections to people who are living in that area. And I think it's important to have that sense of community and identity as well. So what have we achieved in these 2 projects? Well, we've now found over 1,000 confirmed matches in our testers. I am only restrained by the amount of time that I can spend doing this, because I could spend all of my day just going through people's match lists and just confirming these matches, which is great. And what we're also finding is that we're able to link people out further and further and further in the families. So we're not only looking for maybe people who are cousins or second cousins of each other, we're looking for people who are maybe as far out as sixth cousins. And that is people who share 5 times great grandparents. So you have to go right up the tree to come right back down again. And what that's doing is proving the identity of everyone that's been researched in that tree, right up the tree and right back down to the match again. And then we can find other people who share those same segments of DNA, and we know they're also linked to those same ancestors at the top of the tree. That's how we're achieving this, and this is how we're getting further, because we can start to build up these genetic groups of people who are all connected in the same way through the same ancestral pair. And also, if you listen to DNA talks or you speak to people about DNA, a lot of people say, oh, DNA only goes back 5 generations. Well, it doesn't. And we have proved this, I would say, hundreds of thousands of times in our research so far. We have found matches back through autosomal DNA back into the 1740s. In fact, I've just got one recently that's going back as far as 1717. And this is where there was a couple born in 1717. They married in the 1730s, 1740s. They went on to have a number of children, and we have descendants of these children who are matching each other through autosomal DNA. So it's also achieving something that quite a lot of people say isn't actually possible, but we can now prove that it is possible. And that's also important for genealogical research, that we know that we can do these things. Another thing we've actually managed to do is find the maiden name of unknown mothers. Now you might wonder how we do that, because there's no names contained in the DNA. But basically what we can do is we can look at people who we know are closely related. And then we can look at the other people who match them. And what we can do, on occasion, we can start to link these people together. And what we might have is maybe a baptism in 1820 or 1830, and we may have this baptism, but we don't know that that child being baptized is either the person that we have got on somebody's tree or the sibling of somebody that we've got on the tree. But what our DNA research enables us to do is to link it to that record without any doubt whatsoever. And we can start to then put brothers and sisters back into a family format, and we can prove that people that we didn't know were related to each other actually are. And then we can test it by the amount of DNA shared and shared segments, and we can get a very good result which will prove that people are related in the way that we have worked out. So it's also very important to get those additional siblings. And sometimes we're able to find sources that we didn't know we have. Now, we all know that there's wills from 1858, and you will probably be aware that PRONI has a number of wills before that have been found. But through our projects, we've actually uncovered other wills that are held in private collections that maybe people have in the attic. We've been able to get information out of those. We've also found people from Ballycarry and Islandmagee who have emigrated to other parts of the world. And just in the last week, we found somebody else who had matched one of our kits, and they knew that their ancestors had left Islandmagee in the 1850s. They'd emigrated to Australia, and one of the ladies had died out there when she was 85. And in Australia, when you die, you're asked the names of your parents. So she had written down, well, her family had given that information when she had died, and her parents' names were recorded on her death certificate, and that was in 1900. So because we had that information, we then knew one generation further back than the records are here, and we were able to link people as her siblings. So we're using all these little kernels of information and putting it together in a cohesive form to recreate these family trees. And then we're making this information available on a website called WikiTree. And WikiTree is a concept of a one world tree where each person who has lived can have a profile. So we're recording the individual people that we have as ancestors in this project, and then we are showing these family groups, and we're putting it all up there. And where we're making a genealogical link through DNA, we're putting that in as research notes. So all of that information is out there, and anyone who participates in our project can go in and look at their ancestors in this tree format. So it's a way of us making sure that the information that we are putting together is actually accessible to other people as well and can be used in the future. And we're using documentary evidence to prove each step, and we're showing what that documentary evidence is on all of the pages in WikiTree. So we've got landing pages for both the Island McGee and the Ballycarry projects, and then you can go in and look at individual profiles. You can also look at statistics. We have population statistics there for censuses that no longer survive. So we basically know how many people were living in these particular townlands from 1821 on, and we've estimates for some periods before that. So we can use this information so we know the total number living there, and then we can start to work out the individual people who that number contained, if you understand me. So we have all of that information up there, and we're constantly adding to that every day as our project goes on. So just want to give you one very, very quick example here. And this is based on a family that was called Orr that lived in Ballycarry. So what we've got here at the bottom of the tree on the left-hand side, we've got William Orr and Margaret Semple McAlpin. You just can't see her name because it's too big for the slide there. And what we found was we have identified 9 people in the database that are all descendants of that one couple. And we were able to find how they matched, and we had genealogical proof because William was born in 1828 and Margaret was born in 1829. So they married after 1845. We have the marriage certificate. We've been able to find baptisms for their children, and we could genealogically prove all of those connections. So because we now have 9 people, we could look at all the segments that were shared between them. So this is the segments of DNA, and then we could look for others who shared them. And what we found was that there was a descendant of William Miller and Jane Thompson that matched them. And when we started to put the family tree together, we could find that William Miller was actually the child of Margaret Orr. So we now have a surname which is in common with the other 9 descendants. We know that they are connected through DNA, which means they have to have a common ancestor. And when we worked the trees further back, we could look at wills and other sources that were available, and we were able to trace them back to a common ancestral couple, Alexander Orr and his wife Margaret, and Alexander was born in 1746. So now we know for certain that they have 2 children. So that's the type of thing that we're starting to do. But it doesn't then end there. It's not just enough to say that we've got a 10th match and therefore we can now prove them as siblings. So because we now have more information, we can then look at things from that perspective and try to take things slightly further. And what we've tried to do is we've tried to look at other sources. Now Sandra was able to put us on to the Ulster Pedigrees, which was a book produced by Galwin Orr. He died in 1830. So he had written a genealogical entries. Well, he had written this book about the Orr family, and he had been going around certain parts of Ireland, and he had been speaking to people that had the surname Orr, and he had been building up various family trees and reconstructing them together. So we could look at that, and we found that the people that we had in our family tree were actually mentioned in this book. So it gives us even more to work on. But until we had that link, this book wasn't something that was going to be relevant to us. So it tells us that when we look at Alexander at the top of the tree, well, we know that he had a wife, Margaret. That's what we were able to tell from our genealogical research. We were able to find out from this book he was actually married twice. We also knew that Margaret wasn't just Margaret. We then got her surname, which was Symington. So we were able to work that out. We also found out that he had a niece called Mary, and Mary married locally to a man called James White, and that meant that there's other descendants in that area that we have yet to find who would be also connected to that family. So because it's his niece, this has taken us out through his brother to his niece and bringing us out further in the family. So the common ancestors would then be further back than 1746. So we still haven't found those particular testers yet, but we're aiming to do so. We've also found that Alexander was an uncle of James Orr, who some of you may have heard was the bard of Ballycarry, and he's quite well known in those parts. So again, we have a link to James Orr, and it's also given us the direct ancestors of Alexander about 3 or 4 generations back, which has taken us back to Scotland in the 1500s. So this is where we started with a couple of DNA matches, we expanded it out, and then we're able to link other sources in there. And we've done this on multiple families multiple times. Some of the families in Island McGee, we don't have just 9 testers at the bottom, we have upwards of 40 for some of them. So we're getting really good genealogical proof, and it's really helping us to reconstruct these family trees. So we are funding some of these tests, and we are hoping that anyone here today who is an ancestor from Ballycarry or Island McGee will come forward and speak to us, and we would be prepared to look to see if we could possibly fund that. But also we do have DNA tests available for anyone else who would want to test, and they're available in reception today at £40. They can either be paid in cash or you can pay online if you wish to do so. We have a worldwide database. We have our North of Ireland DNA project with over 9,000 people in that project at the moment. But that is where I am stopping now. So I'm just going to reduce my presentation down, open up Sandra's, and then I think we'll take questions at the end, if that's okay with you.
Hello everyone. I'm going to talk about the transcribing work that we do and explain how we go about it and show you some examples of what we encounter along the way. Since the formation of the North of Ireland Family History Society in 1979, there have been enthusiastic members transcribing records. Let's go on to the second slide. So what is transcribing? Well, copying information from an original, and that could be from a baptism, marriage or burial register, gravestone inscription, school admission records, newspaper notices, and anything else that we can get hold of. We obtain written permission from the organisation concerned and adhere to the convention of transcribing births up to 100 years ago, marriages 75 years ago, and deaths over 50 years ago. So why do we transcribe? Well, it's a way to preserve records for future generations, but also a typed document. It's so much easier to read than a handwritten one. It's also a huge benefit to the organisation who owns the records, as they can access the information more easily, and it saves wear and tear on their original documents. What have we transcribed? Well, the bulk of our work is with church records and headstones, but we've also transcribed school records, newspaper notices, and we have a collection of mourning cards. Now, in the days before telephones, and everybody couldn't afford to put, and it was in a newspaper, little cards were sent out to family and friends telling people of a death and where and when the burial would take place. So we have collected a lot of these. They've been transcribed and the transcriptions are on our website freely available, and then we can give people a copy of the image, a digital copy if they request it. And our originals are all in archival storage in the research centre. So, when I took over this role as transcribing projects coordinator, I worried I wouldn't have the contacts to source records for transcription. But at that point, we were given images of baptisms and marriages for 42 churches in Ballymena and the surrounding area. Then came images of baptisms and marriages for Ballynear Presbyterian Church, and then images for 5 Roman Catholic parishes. And still more church registers are coming our way, with records from several churches in the Shankill Road area of Belfast being the most recent. Our library now contains indexed transcriptions of baptism and marriage records for 190 churches and over 300 graveyards, and work continues. Members can request a lookup of these, and a library list of all the Society's books is available on the website. The researcher should, of course, view the original if they possibly can to verify the information, but the transcribed record is usually a good pointer in the right direction. So how do we transcribe? Well, we send guidelines to new volunteers explaining how to record. For example, surnames should be in capital letters, and abbreviations must be recorded as seen. We can't assume that JOS is Joseph, because it could be Josephine, or it could be Joshua. So we transcribe what we see and let the researcher decide if they want to see something different. By photographing registers and emailing images and a spreadsheet template to members, it doesn't matter where in the world they live, they record in the spreadsheet the data from the images and simply return the completed work by email. In recent years, members in Australia, Canada, England, Ireland, New Zealand, Scotland and the United States of America have contributed their time and effort by this method. A copy of the transcription work is checked by different members and then collated, sorted alphabetically by surname and printed. A copy is given to the provider of the records and a copy retained in our library. Having digital images of their registers is a valuable backup for any organisation. Many of our branches have their own projects to transcribe and publish records, and those publications are available from the Society's website. So now for some examples. This is 1791, and you can see that the recording shows the child's name, whether it's a son or daughter, and the father's name, and whether they've paid. Not all registers are the same. Every one that we see is different in one way or another. We get used to the style of writing. You pick up on little things that the original writer has done, like the D's in this have all got a big loop up at the top, and that's really useful if that's consistent throughout when you're trying to figure out, is this Daniel or is it David? So if the big loop's there, it's David. So this one is the Register of Admissions to Belfast Royal Academy. We worked on these. The earlier registers than these, 1880 I think this one started, the earlier registers were always being stored in a basement, and the basement flooded, and they were all thrown out. So we were lucky to get this one, and the school was delighted to have this. The archivist at the school has used it a lot. So we've got the date that the child entered the school. These ones are all 1921, 1st of September, 2nd of September. The department of the school that they entered into, so there was the preparatory, the prep, and then the girls' school or the boys' school. Now girls were only admitted from 1900 into the girls' school. They were allowed into the prep a few years before that. I don't know where they went after the prep when they couldn't get into the main school, but anyway. So we've got the child's name, forenames and surname, the father's name, the address, the date of birth, the school that the child previously attended, which is a very useful piece of information. We've also got their religion, and then over at the side there are notes about exam results or when they left. One of them left because it was too far. That's all it said, too far. And the address was Mollusk, so that was too far. Now, there are addresses here of parents in Coke and Macrofelt, and a lot of the children actually boarded locally to the school around the Cliftonville Road and Clifton Park Avenue, so that's also noted. There's a lot of military fathers and ministers. And one that stuck out for me here was this one. I'm not sure how well you can see that. On the 1st of September 1921, into the prep school was Winifred Eileen Hill. And Winifred's father was the Reverend David Hill of 144 Clifton Park Avenue. And over at the far right, her previous school was Australian State School. So I then had to, being nosy, wanted to know when they came back from Australia. So I discovered that her parents, David Hill and Emma Hall, were married in Newcastle, and this only took about 10 minutes to find out. They were married in Newcastle on the 8th of August 1912, and on the 23rd of August 1912, they departed from London on a ship to Brisbane. They had 2 daughters born in Australia, and they returned from Australia in June 1920. And sad to say, in November 1920, their mother died. So trees on Ancestry show that they all eventually ended up in England, and the father married again. But it's just interesting, the social history that you pick up on just by plucking a name out of a register. And people don't tend to look at a register like this because they think, oh, my ancestor wouldn't have gone to BRA, but you don't know. You don't know if you don't look, but because we've got it all indexed, it's easy to find out. And in this particular register, what happened was, in later years, people added in notes. So we've got notes like Bank of Ireland manager in Downpatrick, or went to Canada, and just different things about what they did with in their work. Or if they married a former pupil, it often says who they married. So I think it's been somebody from the Old Boys or Old Girls Associations has sort of added that information in later. So there's lots of extra little bits there. This next one is Holy Family, Roman Catholic Church off the Antrim Road in Belfast, 1902, and these are marriage records. Now we had to make a decision about whether it was worth recording marriages after 1845 or 1864, because they're on Irish genealogy. But with a lot of these Roman Catholic records, as well as having the civil register, they had their own register, and this is their own register for 1902. And this doesn't just record the same information as you would get on a civil registration. Up there we've got the name of the person getting married, can't read it very well from here, and where they're from, or their address, which is mostly Belfast addresses. But the next column is the names of the parents, and it's not just the father's name, it's the mother's name with her maiden name and their address. So what have we got in addresses? And before I show that, I'll just say that in the 1940s there were a lot of service people getting married. So we've got Ballymena, Carnlough, Sligo, Pennsylvania, New York, County Monaghan, Roscommon, Glasgow, Ardglass, Limerick, Mayo. There's hardly a county in Ireland not mentioned in those records. They're very thick. The book's so thick of the baptisms that we couldn't put the marriages in the same book. It has to be in a separate one. The baptisms actually have records of those children who were baptized, when they were confirmed, and when and where and who they married. And those marriages are all over the world. So these are marriages. We've then got, if there's any impediment to the marriage, there will be notes about whether it's a mixed marriage. There'll be notes on consanguinity, whether they're blood related to the person they're getting married, third or fourth or whatever. And then the witnesses with their address. So it is worth transcribing them, even though they're within civil registration. And that's why I really like these records. So, have a look at this one. This is a Methodist baptism with only a year, no date. Sydney Robinson, daughter of George Webster, 31 King's Court Street. I wasn't sure about Sydney, so I decided to look at civil registration and discovered that Sydney was registered as a male. So he's female, she's female baptized, and male when registered. But it is the same person. You can see the address is the same, King's Court Street. The mother's surname is Robinson, which is why he's got Robinson. Maybe even her father was Sydney, who knows? So I needed to check somewhere else, just for my own curiosity, and find the child in County Longford in 1901, living with his grandmother and two aunts. Sydney Robinson Webster, grandson, Methodist, age 2, born in Belfast. So that settled me, that put my mind to rest. I was happy I'd sorted that one out. So, project management. This is a list of the order of things that we do. First thing is get the consent form signed. Agree with the data holder, the dates we're going to record, and where and when the work will take place. Arrange for the photographs to be taken, and where are we going to take them. Set up a spreadsheet template to match the order of columns in the register, because it's much easier to record if you've got them going in the same order. We can always change the order later. Plan how many images the transcribers might get. I've always tended to go with about 100 records for people, although if somebody's just starting out, I would give them maybe 50 just to get going, to see how they get on, see if they like doing it, and then up it to 100. And then some people want more than that, so we just work with them. And it's important to keep a record of who's got what. Otherwise, you would be lost in the hundreds of images that we've got. When they get it, the date, and when they return it. Then when the checkers get it, record that, and when that comes back. So once the corrections are made, it's all combined, put into alphabetical order. But the way I sort it is grouped so that they're in families for the most part. So then you can see whether a mother's name has been recorded incorrectly. It's another check. So if you've got Mary, Mary, Mary as the mother, and then suddenly a Margaret, you have to look back at the image to see why is there a difference there. Has the register got that, or has the transcriber mistranscribed? So this is what it looks like working on screen. With the image at the top, I use Photoshop Elements, but any image viewer will do. And then the spreadsheet down below. So it means then you can scroll down quite quickly and just type in what you're seeing. This was a really lucky strike for me. This is Ballyeaston Second Presbyterian Church, and we got this off the back of having done Ballynure for somebody, and it tied in with the Ballyeaston project, which all is great. But on the right hand side there, you'll see Robert Erdis is the father, Lisna Lynchie. Two children, James Erdis Jr. and Margaret Erdis, went to 1833 and 1835. I know this family, Robert Erdis and Sarah Reid from Lisna Lynchie. Went to Ballylinn Church, and all the children I could find, the younger children, were baptised in Ballylinn. I could never find these two, but I knew they existed because I had marriages for them. And I knew approximate ages because of the marriage of the parents and the next children. And I had estimated 1833 and 1835, and I found them. And I was delighted. And when I wondered why these two were in Ballyeaston, I looked to see when Ballylinn Church opened, and it was 1836. So once the church closer to home opened, they decamped and went to Ballylinn. So Vincent's going to tell you more about the Ballyeaston project in a few minutes. I'm going to sign off and just say, our mantra is type what you see. Transcribing records and preserving them for future generations is a fascinating and rewarding task, and is a wonderful way to learn about social history. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon. I think a lot of this will seem like a parallel for the Ballycarry and NIFHS projects, because we're set up in principle to achieve the same objectives, but the source is actually an 1813 census that was discovered in Ballyeaston. Right. So these were the objectives of the project. It's not really about Ballyeaston as such, it's about the census. So although it's very similar and we'll use the same tools and try to develop the same results, it is not a locality-based project as such. So it's not really on people there as well. The census is, as you can see, 2012 individuals and 388 families. Get this right, Vincent. Right, it's a very old source for County Antrim, and anybody who's been doing Irish genealogy at all will recognise that having a census back from 1813 is fabulous, even if it is only one parish. So we're obviously going to be trying to find the links to the people in the census, and then trying to develop links between them and other families and other people around the world. And Right, well, like I say, it's very much, you can see it's very much in parallel with the Ballycarry and the Isle of Magee, but we're much less further forward. It's a recent project being done by the Newton Abbey branch rather than by the society as such. Right, and this is, again, this is just the same thing as Martin has been talking about. And we drove family trees backwards and sideways. So we've been researching the trees. What happens is when the volunteers got together, each volunteer chose a family to work on, to try and work their way backwards into that, building family trees. If you could find anybody who already had tested in Ballyeaston, there were some 17 people got DNA kits when we had our first meeting with the people there. And then, as was just mentioned, the Ballyeaston church records have been transcribed by Sandra and her team. That's better, that's it. Oh, the actual census itself was transcribed, mainly so that we could have a copy sorted alphabetically. It's easier to do the work. Also, we can annotate our copy of it without disturbing the original. So again, this is just, we're looking to develop connections. So this bit is, and again, it's exactly the same as the Ballycarry. We're looking to try and work out what sections, what segments of DNA are related to which families, and that we can track across. And then we will be compiling a report at the end to both the parish and to the members, and we will also be recording all the families on WikiTree, which is a slow process. This is where we started. We came across the 1813 census in the back of this book by Jim Wilson. So it's the history of First Ballyeaston Presbyterian Church, and it's titled His House on the Hill. Now this is the printed census. As you can see, it's a proper one, as you may be able to see. It's a proper census where you've got people's names, their ages, grouped in families, with the father's profession given, and on occasion the mother's profession is given as well. Doing our due diligence, Sandra came across this in the Public Records Office here, upstairs. It's a handwritten version by William McKinney, who
of
Century Hill, who would have been doing his transcriptions in the 1880s, 1890s, so some time ago. It is interesting that there are discrepancies between this version and the version in the book. And because of that, it leads us to believe that both were working from the original census, and there's where someone hasn't been able to read what was on it, and another place where somebody else has interpreted it differently. Unfortunately, we do not have access to the original, and if any of you know where it is, please let us know. And we also, this is it, transcribing into the Excel spreadsheet allows us to search by name and for us to create notes. Now, this is where I have to admit a connection myself. My great-great-granduncle, one Thomas Jackson, marries Rosanna Stewart, a miner in Ballyeaston Church in 1862. And for anybody who's local, that is the Jackson family of Ballynewer, the butchers, who are still there. So naturally I had some Stewart background when I was doing my family tree, so I built on it. So I was built on it, obviously using Irish genealogy, which is where that image came from, irishgenealogy.ie. Also, I was very lucky, got a newspaper notice which actually gave me the marriage of Rosanna's father and mother, so we now knew that her mother was Jane Main. They got married in 1835. Wills were fabulous in this case. Now, an ordinary will generally gives you the children of the parents, but there were two wills in particular, one in the main family and one in the Stewart family, who were bachelors who died, and they were leaving money to nephews and nieces, to their married sisters, and it would give their name to their cousins. And between them, we got a number of different possible families, and we were able to prove that they were actually the same family. By like I say, even to the extent that one of Rosanna's children got an inheritance from her brother. So it proved that Thomas Beggs Stewart was actually a sibling of Rosanna. Then we got information from the family. This was actually very interesting. When first approached to the minister in Ballyeaston, he was interested enough to allow us to organise a talk in the parish, in the church hall, with the current parishioners. It was very well attended. And we had a few exhibits along with the talk. So we had copies of the maps of the townlands, a copy of the 1813 census, some of the 1901 census, the 1911 census. And I had brought along the Stewart family tree as I had it at that stage, and put it out, and in came a gentleman who came and went, "That's my daddy." So another William Stewart, there's lots of William Stewarts about, and he was our first DNA volunteer. And not only did he volunteer to get his DNA done, he went back and said, "I've got some family papers." So the land records of the farm, of the various bits of farm, who got what, and a will that doesn't exist in the public records. That's the only copy. So these wills are fabulous. But like I say, working through, they still work the same land that they have done since the 1813 census, because I eventually got them back there. Then of course, Sandra's wonderful church records. When she did the Ballyeaston, we were able to get Rosanna's father's, it's not, I was going to say date of birth, but it's not. Well, it is and it isn't. It's the date of baptism. But working through the records, we've discovered that only one date is recorded with in Ballyeaston. But where we've been able to prove it, they have been the date of birth, as well as the date of baptism. And there are rumours in the history of the book that the minister used to go around on horseback and attend the families who were given birth. So it was just an interesting side. But of course, not only did we get Rosanna's father's records, we also got the name of his father and the name of his mother. So we now had a William Stewart and a Mary Beggs. And something that would have passed me by, I was looking for marriage records, wasn't getting anywhere, but Sandra remembered seeing that name somewhere. And in her transcription of Donegal records, she had a William Stewart and a Mary Beggs, with their location being the congregation of Ballyeaston, getting married on the 31st of December 1812. And of course this gives us two bits of information. First of all, the marriage, which is great, but it also gives us the fact that although it's an 1813 census, at least some of the data had to be collected in 1812. Right, linking it to the 1813 census, linking the Stewarts wasn't too bad, because we knew the townland that they came from, and the only Stewart in that townland is this one. So it's the widow Stewart. It's something a bit odd here as well. The widow Stewart is 35 and the children, William, 25. So we assume that's the second or subsequent wife of William's father. But which Mary? We didn't have a townland. So this is one advantage of this spreadsheet. There's all the Marys in the census, all the Mary Beggs. Now, Mary was recorded as being a minor on her wedding, so we can exclude age 50 and age 35. And I think it's reasonable to exclude age 9 and age 11. So that leaves us one, which is Mary, aged 18, which of course 21 is the full age at that stage. So that gives us, this is Mary in her family, with her parents, Robert Beggs and Agnes, the wife. But with Robert being 50 in 1813, oops.
Steve, this is the equipment here.
That's it. Right. After all that, all I wanted to get was we're actually back in 1763 in the creation of the Stuart family tree. So we now have 235 descendants of William and Mary. We've got the DNA bit hasn't really taken off yet because we're just at this point. This is just one tree. There are other volunteers doing other trees. We have 14 volunteer DNAs. We have the 17 DNA kits that were bought on that first meeting. And I've forgotten how many we've come across that are related. But all we've done at this stage is say we've got matches. We haven't started the analysis of it. And I'm still struggling hard to get these 235. And there are a lot of places that there's a lot more research needs done. And that basically is where we've got to with it. But we're hoping to have some successes in the same way as Martin has. But we already have, in one sense, we've got back to 1763. But I can tell you, my own family, I get no further back than the 1860s because my family comes from up country into Belfast and we can't find specifically the church to go back through. So that's really all I'm doing today. So thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Linda and I'm from the Belfast branch of the Northern Ireland Family History Society. So we've set up a Belfast City Cemetery DNA project. For the main reason is, and that was a very good segue, Vincent, which we had practiced when he said he had Belfast family and he couldn't find their origins, and it's a very common thing. So many people came into Belfast in the mid-1800s looking for work. They came for the factories, the shipyards and everything else. And you can only get back so far, and you can't often find out where they came from. You can find out possibly where they came from, but it's a guess. There's no proof. So we're hoping that by analysing the DNA of people with ancestors buried in the Belfast City Cemetery, that we can make connections and find our way back, for some of us at least. How does the DNA help? Well, it's the same thing that Martin was talking about. But we don't have a location to start with. So we're looking at the DNA of people, we're looking at their matches, and then we're seeing how they connect and what patterns we can see on locations. So if people have ancestors coming from, you know, Antrim, then maybe that's where your ancestors came from. So there's a bit more work involved. It's not quite as straightforward as the Island McKee and Ballycarry projects. But it's the only way you're ever going to find it. If you've got people in Belfast and you don't know where they came from, it's only DNA that's going to uncover that and prove it. So we build up a picture of the ancestry of the tester, and that allows us to carry out research in a certain area to see if we can prove what we're trying to prove. And really, the whole thing is about the more people who test, the more information we have. So who are the DNA testers? Well, we've had 2 open days at the cemetery in the visitor centre there, and people have come along, they've taken a DNA test. If they've not done their own tree, we've done the research for them. And so we've been able to add not only DNA to our database, but also family trees to our database. The next step was to ask our own Belfast branch members for them to take part. And with little incentive, they can win a DNA kit if they put their DNA on, put their ancestry on WikiTree, which I'll come to in a minute. So that's where we're at the moment. It's just basically our branch and other testers coming in. We're also using WikiTree to record the information. WikiTree is free. It's a single family tree, and for a global family tree that anybody can contribute to. So we've set up a Belfast City Cemetery DNA project. The beauty of WikiTree is that you don't even have to register to see the information on there. So all the information we're getting and in all the projects is free for everybody to see. If you do register, you can contribute, and you can make alterations to profiles. So we have a project on, we've set up a project on there, and anybody who categorises their profile of the ancestor who's buried in the cemetery can categorise it to that project. The benefit of WikiTree is, and because we're trying to look for an unknown location, WikiTree brings together everybody. And because there's only one profile per person, if you enter your ancestor that's buried in the cemetery, you might find that that person is already on WikiTree with an existing ancestry. If that's the case, you link into their tree. So it's vital for this project that we have all the information from the different people buried in the cemetery in one place to see what connections we can find. And it's also the same with the DNA. To find the DNA matches, we want all the DNA in one place. So family tree DNA is where we do it, is where we do all our DNA analysis. So it's really looking for connections and finding patterns. It's the wrong way. How are we progressing? Well, it is slow. There's a lot of work involved if we get new testers and we're researching their family trees. That can take some time, but we're getting there, and we've got quite a few done. But we do want to expand so that more people can take part. We just have to manage it so that we can cope with it. So the next thing will be to ask our wider society membership, not just the Belfast branch. We will be holding more open days and events, which we advertise around the place and on Facebook. And we will increase awareness of the project via social media, which we did put a post on there, and it was completely inundated by people all wanting to join the project. And so we just had to give them a bit of basic information, but we will make it more widely available. There are 220,000 people buried in the Belfast City Cemetery. We currently have just under 700 profiles on WikiTree of people buried in the cemetery. And if you go to the DNA project page, you can see the names of all the people buried there that have profiles on WikiTree. So with 220,000, we do have quite a long way to go, but we'll get there someday. And that's it. Thank you.